Good morning, you guys. It's your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the basketball community. Um, Tonight, in place of basketball conversations, I'm going to host a, special live stream show reflecting on the Eritrean refugee situation that is going on in Africa currently right now. And so, in place of that, which is my regular basketball conversation show every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time, I'm gonna have that kind of special episode to bring you light about what's going on in the country of Eritrea and how the refugee situation is continually growing more. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. All right, let's get down to business here, shall we? So this morning historical perspective video is going to touch upon one of the most unique championship teams in recent and basically in the history of NCAA basketball. And so we're going to talk about the 1988 89 Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team. Now, this was a team that was very talented and had high expectations of making a deep run to the NCAA tournament. But there were a lot of unique, different circumstances that really made that team very enjoyable. But more importantly, basically a huge roller coaster of different emotions. Now, during the season, during that season, the Michigan Wolverines finished second in the Big Ten in the previous year after going 26 and 8 and 13 and 5 in Big Ten play, and they made it to the Sweet 16 before losing to North Carolina. Now, heading to the 88-89 season, this team was led by their top captains, basically with Glen Rice and also with Ramiro Robinson. Okay, and so during that season, the team was basically ranked in all 18 weeks of that season. All right, where they began the season at number 3 in the nation. They ended at number 10 in the nation, but at their best, they peaked at number 2. This was a team that was led by their top scorer, Glen Rice. During his senior year, Glen Rice the Big Ten record for 3-point field goal percentage against Wisconsin. Making all 7 of his free throw attempts. Um, Rice's record of 949 points establishes the current school single season record, surpassing Cassie's Russell's record in 1966 with 800 points. He also set the current single season field goal record with 336 made shots. All right, and also he set the record for 3-point field goals in a season with 51.6%. All right, and additional to that, he also set the school record for career single season 3-point shots made with 139 with 35 and 99 respectively. That would last the 10 and 8 years respectively. He also set the single game free goal percentage with at the same game I told you guys about Wisconsin. All right, so this was a guy that was a dead on 3-point shooter. If you haven't watched Glen Rice play, it's a treat to watch because he was one of the most streakiest shooters you ever find in the NBA. He was a high volume shooter that was so good at coming off of picks, and when his shot was on, he could literally light the house up on fire. And I'm gonna talk about his tournament run during that time in just a few minutes here. But during that entire season, there was a unique coaching controversy that was going on there. You see, Bill Frieder recruited most of those guys that played on that team, but after Mr. Bo Schembechler became the athletic director of Michigan, there was friction between the two men because Bo Schembechler was basically the football coach for many decades, and he really wasn't a person that really looked at the basketball program as a huge commodity thing. And what really such a situation very strange in a sense was that after they made the NCAA tournament, Bill Frieder announced that he was taking a job at Arizona State. But before the tournament began, Bo Schembechler dropped a huge hammer that basically shifted the course of their entire tournament run. He fired Bill Frieder and replaced him with Steve Fisher, who by that time had no previous head coaching experience in the NCAA level. And in his famous quote of Bo Schembechler when he basically announced the new coach, he pretty much said only a Michigan man can only coach a Michigan team. But the ironic thing is Bill Frieder was a Michigan alumnus while Steve Fisher wasn't, and so that created a little bit of a buzz heading into that '89 tournament. But but and everything went out the window when things got going here. All right, so this team earned numerous conference records for statistical categories. So Rice won the scoring title when he averaged 24.8 points per game, as well as a championship as a three point shot title with 55 in his conference games. Lloyd Vaughn also won the field goal percentage record with 67% from the field, and Terry Mills basically led the Big Ten in block shots average with 1.2 blocks per game. So heading into that NCAA tournament, they were underdogs coming in. Nobody anticipated making it as far as the national championship game. Specifically, when you had Illinois, who were the top favorites that year. If you haven't checked out the '88-'89 Illinois team, do yourself a favor. They were really a talented team that was led by their three big guards of Kendall Gill and Nick Anderson. And that team finished 31-5 and beat Michigan twice that year. So during that 6-game tournament run, Glen Rice set the current NCAA record for single tournament records for points with 184 points, along with 75 made field goals and 27 made 3-point field goals, as well as the career 3-point field goal percentage. Made a minimum of 30 and pretty much set the record with 56.5 percentage. All right. So Ramil Robinson, who was their defensive, who basically was a defensive point guard and floor leader, set the current championship game record with 11 assists. All right, as well as the Final Four record with 23 assists in those 2 games alone. So during that tournament, so Michigan was seeded number 3, and won their first game by defeating Xavier. All right. Then the second round they defeated South Alabama. Then, as they moved on to the Sweet 16, they avenged the loss to North Carolina, who ousted them the previous year and defeated them 92-87, and then defeated Virginia in a blowout to advance to the Final Four for the first time since back in 1976. Then this is where things really got interesting. So in the Final Four, they went up against Illinois, and Bo Schembechler, gave a pet speech to his team after they made it to the Final Four, saying that go out there and defeat Illinois. And so that game was one for the ages. It was a close game down to the end, where Lloyd Vaughn made the game-winning shot with about less than a second remaining to defeat Illinois, and broke the jinx of losing to them twice. You remember what I talked about? How it's hard to beat the same team 3 times. Well, in college basketball, it's the same way. Illinois handed Michigan horrible defeats during that entire year. But when it came down to money time in the NCAA tournament, it's hard to defeat the same team 3 times. It rarely happens, and so they defeated Illinois, and then they went up against another Cinderella team, Seton Hall. All right, and it was pretty much a game for the ages. That game, I'm just going to pull up the stats real quick of that game here, just real quick. I hope you guys are enjoying the video so far. So before I continue, I would tell everybody go check out the highlights of Glen Rice. Glen Rice was a streaky shooter and can lit that place up on fire. And when the shot was going, he was pretty much unstoppable. So in that game, Glen Rice was a killer. He was 12 of 25 from the field, basically 5 of 12 from 3-point range for 41%, and scored 31 points in winning the most outstanding player award. But the game went down to the final seconds, and Ramil Robinson was basically fouled after trying to gain a rebounding attempt. All right, and Ramil Robinson, who was not a good free throw shooter, basically shooting in the mid 50s. In that game, he shot 9 of 10 from the free throw line, and then when he stepped to the line, hit the two biggest free throws of his life to help lead the Wolverines to the title. And from that point forward, a lot of things changed after that. Steve Fisher ended up getting the full-time head coaching job up until 1997, where he eventually helped recruit the famous Fab Five Michigan team in the early 90s. And so that team was a reflection of hard work and pretty much an in-depth talent that was pretty much recruited by somebody else. But when the team was able to focus together and focus on a common goal to win the national championship, they basically strapped up, followed to their leading scorers, and made it happen. And Glen Rice, his performance in that tournament and leading into the national title, helped his draft stock significantly. Now, before he went to the draft in '89, he was in between the rounds between a mid first rounder to maybe a late first rounder. But after his Michigan career ended, all right, he finished as the all-time leader in career points with 2,442 points, all-time in single season points for that '89 season with 949 points. All right, and he's second all-time in career field goals made with 1,003 field goals, and second in single season three-point field goals made with 99 throughout the entire year. But as I said, his stock rose significantly, and he became the number 4 overall pick by the Miami Heat and had a good career. He was a 3-time All-Star with the Charlotte Hornets and helped the Lakers win the title back in 2000 with Shaq and Kobe. So you can pretty much say that his tournament run really propelled him to a really good career in the NBA. And when he was at his peak during the NBA with the Charlotte Hornets, he was one of the top 10 scorers, in '97 when he averaged 26.8 points per game and had a stretch, during that year when he would average between 30 points per game. You know what I mean? The guy was a lethal shooter. And you could reflect back on that entire tournament run that pretty much set up his entire NBA career. And it really was a reflection of how the team, was able to put the coaching controversy aside, focus in on the tournament, and really made an impression out of it. And you could pretty much say during the '80s had a lot of underdog, championships. There were a lot of Cinderella stories and a lot of different teams that came out of nowhere to win the national championship. The only favorites that pretty much won that year was either North Carolina in '82, Georgetown in '84, uh, Louisville. But you could pretty much say that Louisville was a bit of an underdog, but it was not necessarily a Cinderella's team. But also Kansas was a serious Cinderella. You also don't forget Villanova in '85, which I'm going to do a story about that next week. And then you also got Kansas, and then you also had Michigan. Lot of different Cinderella teams sandwiched into only 3 favorites that pretty much won the national title during the '80s. You could pretty much say that the '80s was really the most competitive time in college basketball. There were so many different teams that had great cases to win the national championship, and then it led to a lot of classic games that went down to the wire. And the '89 title game, if we remember, is one of the most classic, championship games in NCAA championship history. And so, I just want to give you guys this kind of perspective about that team in '89. They're still the only team to win a national championship, during that time. And so, this was a phenomenal team that peaked at the right time, and when they had themselves going, they were just a force to be reckoned with. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Let me know what y'all thoughts are about that team. And also, if you want me to do a video about Glen Rice, I might do that one next week. Y'all have a good day. I'll see you tonight.